Brunch was held at my brother's new house, one of those clean-lined glass and granite things with a wine fridge larger than my old apartment's kitchen. I arrived 5 minutes early with a basket of still warm scones wrapped in a tea towel, embroidered by Clara, a sweet widow I cleaned for on Fridays. She once told me, "No matter how the world sees you, always bring something warm to the table." I should have known better, but I went anyway. The patio buzzed with laughter and the soft clink of champagne flutes. Sunlight spilled across polished stone, catching on my thrifted blouse, pale blue with a missing button I'd stitched shut. I smoothed it instinctively, suddenly very aware of how everyone else was dressed. Linen, silk, diamonds that caught, the sun like tiny knives. My father was holding court near the mimosa pitcher, his voice just loud enough to override everyone else's. My mother stood beside him, sipping quietly, eyes already distant. "Look who finally made it," my brother said, more to the group than to me. I smiled and held out the basket. I brought scones. No one reached for one. My mother glanced at them like they might stain her fingers. We sat around a long white table that smelled faintly of lemon oil and wealth. Someone poured me sparkling water without asking. I tried not to notice. I placed the basket in the center like an offering, and then it came. The comment. My father leaned back in his chair, looked directly at me, and chuckled. "Pathetic girl, still cleaning other people's houses?" There was a pause, not long enough for anyone to interject. Just long enough for the shame to bloom behind my ribcage. Then laughter erupted, soft and cruel, like someone had let loose a flock of crows. I swallowed hard. I looked at my mother. She looked at her napkin. My brother gave a little cough, somewhere between a laugh and discomfort. "Come on, Dad." But no one stopped him. No one said it wasn't true, and that was the part that stung. Not that. They believed it, but that they thought it was all I was. I stared down at the basket, the steam from the scones beginning to fade. I'd used cinnamon from a special jar Clara kept just for me. She said I reminded her of her daughter, gone now, from cancer. I had braided the dough that morning while humming to a song I hadn't heard in years. I'd wanted to bring a piece of something real, something that was mine. Instead, they saw a woman in second-hand clothes, still smelling faintly of bleach and lavender spray, who had once married a man who left her, and who now scrubbed sinks for a living. But they didn't. No, they didn't know about the checking account I never touched, the one with 5 digits growing quietly month after month. They didn't know I had tenants, properties, a company name, a lawyer who sent me quarterly reports. I had built something, quietly, while they laughed. I looked up at my father, smiled just slightly, and reached for a scone. "Still warm," I said. My voice didn't crack. Not once. He smirked, clearly thinking he'd won. That was the moment something in me shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rage. It was colder than that, deeper. Like the quiet click of a lock turning. Something ancient and final. I would not explain myself. I would not correct them. Let them laugh. I broke the scone in half, watched the steam curl upward, and thought of the way Clara always said that warmth rises even in cold places. Maybe especially in cold places. That brunch would be the last time I showed up small. And when they did find out the truth, I wanted it to be the kind of truth that didn't just silence a room. I wanted it to haunt it. I met Greg at a volunteer event. It was one of those charity car washes that left you sunburned and full of hope. He was there in a white t-shirt, sleeves rolled, smile easy, a real estate intern with big dreams and charming laugh lines. He said he liked my work ethic, the way I didn't complain about scrubbing tires in the heat. "I can tell you're not afraid of dirt," he joked, handing me a bottle of water. It didn't sound romantic, but it was the most honest compliment I'd ever received. Back then, I didn't need much. I lived in a modest studio, kept 2 jobs, and took night classes when I could afford them. I wasn't rich, but I was proud. My world was small, manageable, clean. Greg swept into my life like a summer storm. Fast-moving, exciting, a little overwhelming. He had a way of talking about the future like it was already ours. "We'll flip houses," he said. "You and me, side by side. You have the eye, I've got the hustle." When he proposed, he didn't have a ring. He wrapped a red string around my finger and whispered, "One day, I'll give you a diamond that makes the sun jealous." It felt like a promise. One I believed with everything I had. We got married in a courthouse, just us and a couple of friends. No gown, no guests, just a white dress from a thrift store and a cake from the bakery I cleaned on Tuesdays. I didn't care. I was happy. For a while, that happiness lived in tiny, lovely moments. The way he kissed my forehead when I packed his lunch, the lists we made on napkins about what our dream home would look like, the nights we fell asleep, on the floor of our first fixer-upper surrounded by paint fumes and takeout boxes. I took on more cleaning clients to support his growing business. We agreed I'd put school on hold. "Just until we're stable," he said. I trusted that. I trusted him, but the seasons changed, and so did he. The man who once brought me flowers from vacant lots now came home with perfume on his collar that didn't belong to me. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped coming home for dinner at all. When I asked if something was wrong, he'd wave it off. "You're being emotional." I stopped asking. I used to wear a gold locket with a tiny picture of us inside, taken during our honeymoon. I'd touch it when I felt overwhelmed, like it could anchor me. Over time, I realized I hadn't opened it in months. Instead of holding me, Greg held spreadsheets, mortgage papers, business dinners. One night, I made his favorite, rosemary chicken with lemon, and waited until 10 p.m. before giving up. The plate grew cold. So did I. I started to feel like a ghost in our own home, floating from room to room, wiping, down surfaces, picking up after him, folding shirts he never thanked me for. I knew every corner of that house, yet none of it felt like mine. The kitchen tiles I chose, the curtains I sewed, the vintage mirror I'd found for $10 at a garage, sale and polished until it gleamed. All of it felt like I was furnishing someone else's life. I remember standing in that mirror one morning, holding a blouse, pale blue, with a loose button at the collar. Greg had once said it made my eyes look quiet. I didn't know what that meant, but I wore it often, like a silent question. I wore it again at the family brunch years later, the one where my father mocked me. Funny how clothes carry echoes. Even my sister saw it coming. Once, over coffee, she reached across the table and took my hand. "Greg's ambition isn't love," she whispered. "It's hunger." I shook her off, told her she didn't understand him. But maybe I was the one who didn't understand. I didn't want to believe that I was giving everything to a man who was only ever reaching for more. More properties, more status, more control. And still, I stayed. I told myself it was a rough patch, that all couples went through it, that love was work, but deep down, I knew. The silence between us had become its own language, one I was fluent in. Late at night, I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it tick, counting its slow rotations like breaths I couldn't take. I clung to our wedding photo like it was a shield, his hand on my waist, my eyes bright, hopeful, blind. It sat on the mantel for years. I dusted it weekly. I never moved it, until the day I did. That day would come. And with it, the reckoning. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day that slips past you in beige tones, routine, predictable, quiet in that deadening way only long-term numbness can feel. I had just finished cleaning Mrs. Hannigan's sunroom, still, smelling of lemon oil and pine cleaner, when I stopped by the mailbox on my way up. There, tucked between a bill and a pizza flyer, was a bank envelope. Inside, a statement from our joint credit card. I rarely checked it anymore. Greg handled finances. I handled everything else. But that day, for no reason I could name, I opened it. There it was. Maison de Lumière. Eau de parfum. $263 of $49. My fingers paused over the charge, my breath catching in my throat. Maison de Lumière wasn't just any perfume. It was a boutique fragrance I had once sprayed on my wrist at Nordstrom, then walked away from with the quiet understanding that it wasn't meant for women like me. It smelled like gardenias soaked in moonlight, like secrets whispered into velvet. I remembered thinking, this is how power would smell if it wore pearls. I hadn't bought it. Greg hadn't gifted it. That night I waited. He came home just after 11, tie loose, the faintest sheen of cologne clinging to his collar. Not the same perfume. Something muskier. Cheaper. Late meeting, he muttered, tossing his keys into the bowl by the door without looking at me. I stood in the kitchen, holding the statement like a bruise-turned paper. Who's she? I asked. He barely paused. What? This, I said, holding up the receipt. Maison de Lumière, Greg shrugged, pulling off his blazer. A client gift. For a client who kisses your collar? That was the first time he looked at me. Really looked. Something cold flickered behind his eyes. Don't start, he said flatly. Not tonight. But I couldn't stop. I walked toward him, pulled open the closet, reached into his coat pocket. My hand curled around something small. I brought it into the light. A bracelet, thin, gold, elegant. A charm in the shape of a heart. It wasn't mine. He didn't bother to lie. Instead, he sneered. You clean houses all day and come home reeking of bleach. What man would stay excited by that? I felt the air leave my lungs in one slow, aching exhale. The bracelet trembled in my hand. And then, without thinking, I slammed it against the edge of the sink. It cracked, a delicate snap, like a wing folding in on itself. He didn't flinch. He didn't say sorry. He just watched me, his expression unreadable, like I was a crack in the wall he'd always meant to plaster over. I gave up everything for you, I whispered. My voice didn't even sound like mine. My classes, my body, my time. I scrubbed your dream into reality. Greg stepped back, reaching for his keys. Yeah, well, maybe you should have dreamed bigger. Then he walked out. The door clicked shut like a coffin lid, and I crumbled. I dropped to my knees on the cold kitchen tile, surrounded by crumbs from the dinner I had cooked and he hadn't touched. The bracelet glinted near the drain, broken, like me. I wept until my throat felt like sandpaper, until my body shook from the sheer weight of everything I'd swallowed over the years. The meals eaten alone, the insults passed, off as jokes, the hope that clung to me long past its welcome. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was grief. For the woman I had been. For the time I could never get back. I crawled to the bathroom, my palms burning against the tile, and stared at myself in the mirror. Red eyes, salt-streaked cheeks, that pale blue blouse again. The one he said made my eyes look quiet, looked different now. It looked like silence, like erasure. I peeled it off and let it fall to the floor. In its place, I wrapped myself in a robe Clara had gifted me 2 Christmases ago. Warm, soft, sky-colored. It smelled faintly of lavender and safety. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, rocking gently, and whispered to no one. This isn't where I end. Because somewhere deep beneath the rubble, beneath the bleach and the betrayal and the broken gold, something was still alive. A flicker. A coal. The part of me that remembered how to rebuild. I left that night. No grand goodbye. No confrontation. Just a quiet exit while the moon leaned against the sky like it was tired too. I packed only what I could carry, a duffel bag stuffed with folded work clothes, my journal, and the pale blue blouse I couldn't bear to wear anymore. I left the wedding photo on the mantel, face down. I left the broken bracelet in the sink. I left the woman I had been. There was nowhere to go except forward. Clara was the first person who came to mind. I'd cleaned her house every Friday for almost 2 years. A big Victorian with ivy on the porch and a garden that smelled like thyme and patience. She was a retired school teacher, 73, sharp as glass but soft in all the right places. When I texted her that night, fingers trembling, I expected polite hesitation. Instead, she called me immediately. "Come," she said. "No questions. The guest room's clean. So is the linen closet. You'll be safe here, sweetheart." Her voice made me cry harder than Greg ever had. By the time I arrived, just past midnight, Clara had left the porch light on and a kettle warming on the stove. She opened the door in a floral robe and pulled me into the kind of hug you don't realize you need until you're already in it. We didn't talk much that first night. She handed me tea in a ceramic mug and sat beside me while I cried into my sleeves. There was no pity in her eyes, only quiet knowing. As if she'd once walked through a similar storm and survived. The guest room smelled like lavender and old books. A framed print above the bed read, "Begin again, quietly." I slept for 14 hours. The next morning I woke to sunlight pouring across the quilt, birdsong tapping gently against the window. For a moment I didn't know where I was. Then I remembered. All of it. But instead of panic, there was stillness. The kind that comes after the wreckage, when everything is quiet and your breath finally reaches the bottom of your lungs. I started working again within the week. I cleaned houses by day, took notes by night. Clara let me use her laptop in the evenings. "You're not just rebuilding your life," she said. "You're redesigning it." I began to pay attention in a way I never had before. Every home I cleaned became a classroom. I studied how the wealthy lived, not just what they bought, but how they thought. I noticed books on investing, podcasts about leadership, sticky, notes with goals written in sharp black ink, equity, cash flow, passive income. I wrote those words down in my journal, circled them. I didn't fully understand them yet, but I would. I started listening to podcasts while I scrubbed baseboards. The voices in my earbuds told me about property management, design trends, short-term rentals, compound interest. I soaked it all up. My mop became my mentor. One Tuesday afternoon, while dusting a bookshelf in a home perched high in the hills, I found a dog-eared copy of Rich Woman by Kim Kiyosaki. I borrowed it, just for the night, and read the entire thing on Clara's couch. By morning, something inside me had shifted. I wanted more. Not money exactly. Though I wasn't naive. I wanted autonomy. Choice. A life where no man could hang my worth on a paycheck or perfume. Clara watched me bloom slowly, like a perennial peeking through winter soil. And one day, over tea, she said, "I've got a little nest egg, sitting in a savings account doing nothing. If I lent you some of it, could you turn it into something?" I blinked at her. "You want to invest in me?" "No, darling," she smiled. "I believe in you." That was how I bought my first property. A 2-bedroom cottage in desperate need of love. Peeling paint, cracked windows, a porch that sighed every time you stepped on it. But I saw potential. I saw myself. I scrubbed every inch of that house with my own hands. painted walls by moonlight, sanded floorboards until my palms blistered. Clara brought me sandwiches and encouragement. I slept on a mattress on the floor, surrounded by open cans of paint and possibility. 6 months later, it rented within 3 days. I used the profit to buy another. Then another. No one clapped. No one posted a picture. But I didn't need applause. Had silence, peace, and for the first time in my life, a room that was entirely mine. I bought a small desk, set it beside a window that caught the morning light just right. On it, I placed a framed copy of a quote I found in Clara's kitchen drawer. She remembered who she was, and the game changed. I wore that pale blue blouse again, 1 year, after I left Greg. I paired it with jeans that fit properly and a soft cardigan the color of honey. It no longer made me feel small. It made me feel whole. Like I had taken back something that was once used to silence me. That day, I stood in front of a mirror, touched the collar gently, and smiled at my reflection. Not because I was finished, healing, but because I was no longer hiding. And somewhere deep inside, the coal from that night, the one that first whispered, "This isn't where I end," began to glow. 3 years passed. Not quickly, not quietly, but steadily, like stone becoming smooth in a river. By then, I wasn't cleaning houses anymore. I was buying them, restoring them, renting them. I had a small crew, a business card, a logo I designed myself late. One night in Clara's kitchen, surrounded by coffee cups and floor plans. My hands still bore calluses from sanding baseboards, but they also signed checks now. My name appeared on deeds, contracts, client folders lined neatly in a locking drawer. Named my company New Light Properties, a small tribute to Clara, and to the morning sun that used to pour into that lavender-scented guest room like a promise. Some mornings I still woke with echoes of bleach in my nose and Greg's voice in my head. But they didn't haunt me anymore, not really. They sharpened me, reminded me why I did what I did. I wore a blazer now, not because I had to. No one was watching me fold contracts at my desk, but because it felt right on my shoulders, structured, grounded, like I had earned the weight of it. One Thursday afternoon, while finalizing a refinance deal, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I let it ring twice before declining. Something told me who it was before I even opened the voicemail. "Hey, it's Greg. I've been thinking. I know it's been a while. I just wanted to talk. Call me back?" I deleted it. No anger, no drama, just silence. He didn't deserve even a voicemail. I didn't need to say anything. My absence said enough. Later that month, an email arrived from my brother. Subject: Family Reunion Invite. RSVP by Friday location, River Hollow Country Club. I laughed out loud, a sharp, amused sound that startled even me. I had once scrubbed toilets in that very club. Windex in hand, smile politely fixed, watching, from the shadows, as women in pearls sipped cocktails under chandeliers. Back then, I couldn't imagine being invited there. Now, I was being expected. My brother probably assumed I'd decline. I hadn't attended a single family gathering since the brunch, since the mimosa comment, since I became the pathetic girl who cleaned houses. But something inside me stilled as I read the invite again. I stared at the embossed name of the club, gold lettering against ivory cardstock, and thought, let them see who I became. It wasn't about revenge. It was about presence. I hired a stylist, a woman named Mara, recommended by one of my new clients, a soft-spoken architect who swore by her. "She doesn't just dress you," the woman said. "She uncovers you." And she did. Mara came to my home office with a measuring tape and thoughtful eyes. She didn't ask who I was dressing for. she asked who I was dressing as. Together, we chose a navy blue pantsuit tailored so precisely it felt like armor stitched from silk. Underneath, a champagne blouse that shimmered under light, the exact color of the perfume bottle I never got to wear. She added simple gold hoops, nude heels, a matte lipstick that matched my mood, steady, intentional. I had my hair done the day before. No dramatic change, just shaped and polished, like everything else in my life now. On the morning of the reunion, I brewed coffee in my own kitchen. One I designed myself, with wide butcher block counters and a window that looked out onto the fig tree I'd planted that spring. I laid out the navy suit carefully. Next to it, I placed a soft leather portfolio. Inside, my company's annual report. Photos of renovated properties. Growth charts. A feature from a local magazine titled From Cleaner to CEO, How She Built Her Empire, One Floor at a Time. On the cover of the report, embossed in clean gold lettering, New Light Properties. Founder. My name. I paused before zipping it closed and added a single keepsake. The receipt for the Maison de Lumière perfume, still folded in my journal. After all these years, I didn't know why. Maybe I just wanted to carry it with me, not as a wound but as a scar. Healed over, quiet. The country club was exactly as I remembered. Pristine hedges, imported tiles, a valet who greeted me with a too eager smile. But I walked in differently this time. Shoulders back, steps measured, head high, the same chandeliers, the same linen-draped tables, but I wasn't wiping fingerprints anymore. I was leaving impressions. My brother's eyes widened as I entered. He blinked, then stood. Wow, you look different? I offered, smiling. He nodded. Yeah, great. Thanks. My father was seated at the far end of the room, nursing a scotch, his posture as rigid as ever. My mother beside him, flipping through the event program. Neither looked up at first, until I walked right to them and set the portfolio down on the table. My father raised an eyebrow. What's this? Paperwork, I said calmly. Just something I thought you should see. He opened it. My name shimmered up at him. He flipped through the pages. Photos of homes I owned. Before and after shots of kitchens, bathrooms, balconies. A smiling tenant with a quote beneath her. She gave me a safe home when no one else would. Silence. Fell like a curtain. My mother's mouth parted slightly. My father's eyes narrowed, but not in mockery this time. In recognition. I clean houses, I said softly. Still do, sometimes, but I own them now. He didn't reply. Not a smirk. Not a word. And I didn't wait for one. I turned to leave, heels clicking across marble floors I once mopped. I passed Greg in the hallway. He looked smaller, thinner. That same old cologne clinging too hard to his skin. He opened his mouth, but I walked past him. I didn't need to hear what he had to say. That wasn't the story anymore. Outside, the sky was turning gold. Soft and endless. The kind of light that made everything look like forgiveness. I slid into the back seat of my ride, portfolio in my lap, hands steady. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, utterly whole. Not because I'd proven them wrong, but because I no longer needed them to see me at all. The country club's ballroom gleamed like a memory I never asked to revisit. Tall windows poured soft light over white tablecloths and chilled champagne. Gold accents glinted from napkin rings and jewelry. It smelled like money and entitlement. The same scent I remembered from years ago when I used to polish the baseboards on my knees, invisible to the very people who now filled this room. I stood just beyond the entrance for a moment, letting the hush of arrival settle over me like silk. My heels clicked softly as I stepped onto the marble floor. Each sound felt deliberate, echoing in places where I used to be silent. Heads turned, eyes lingered. Some recognized me. Most didn't. Not at first. I had never been the one to draw attention. But now, I carried it like a tailored coat. It fit. I scanned the room. My father was seated near the head table, drink in hand, shoulders still broad but sagging slightly with age. My mother beside him, thin fingers worrying the rim of her glass. My brother, flushed from laughter or alcohol, leaned into a conversation that died the second he saw me. "Still doing maid work?" My father muttered, not looking up. It didn't sting. Not like it used to. I stepped forward, slowly, and placed a soft leather portfolio on the table in front of him. "Actually, I," said, voice calm, "I came to give you something." He frowned and opened it lazily. Then he stopped. Inside, articles, magazine clippings, rental income reports, property photos. A letter from a nonprofit thanking New Light Properties for funding emergency housing for single mothers. A screenshot of my bank balance printed in grayscale but unmistakable in its six-figure sum. My name at the top of every page. "I clean houses, yes," I said gently. "But I own them now." A beat passed, and then silence, wide and heavy, bloomed around us. My mother's mouth parted. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her glass. My brother paled, lips twitching as if forming a joke that couldn't find air. And Greg. He was there too, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. Blonde, younger, fidgeting with her necklace like she already knew she didn't belong. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in years, I watched recognition turn to something else. Not regret, not apology, shock. I could see him trying to recalibrate me, to fit this version of me into the dusty mold he remembered. But the shape had changed. I no longer fit inside his memory. I looked at him once, then looked away. He didn't matter. I didn't stay long. No victory speech. No, "I told you so." No dramatic exits. Just presence. Quiet and complete. Because the truth was, I hadn't come for revenge. Not really. I came to stand in the life I had built, to take up space in a room that once made me feel so very small. And that was enough. I turned, walked slowly past the rows of tables, the stairs, the whispers. I didn't rush. Outside, the air was cooler than expected. A breeze lifted the edges of my blouse, champagne silk, the same shade as that perfume bottle, the one from the receipt I still kept folded in my journal. I'd never worn it until today. I'd bought it for myself, finally, just last week. A small gift, a quiet reclaiming. The scent clung to my skin like forgiveness. My driver opened the door. I nodded, slid in. We pulled away from the club and I didn't look back. 1 month later, Clara and I stood in the sunroom of the latest property I'd just finished flipping. A mid-century ranch with warm wood tones and a fireplace that smelled faintly of cedar. "You're glowing," she said, smiling. "You always do after a full circle moment." I laughed. Was it that obvious? Only because I know you. I sipped my coffee and looked out the window. The garden was starting to bloom. Lavender and rosemary, Clara's favorites. She reached into her bag and handed me a small wrapped box. "You're going to want to open that." Inside, a delicate gold bracelet, thin, elegant, with a charm shaped like a house. I froze. She squeezed my hand. "You gave your past the closure it didn't deserve," and still rose. "This is a reminder of what you built anyway." Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. I unclasped the bracelet and slid it onto my wrist. It fit perfectly. Later that night, I sat on my own front porch with a glass of wine and my journal open on my lap. I wrote slowly, deliberately. This isn't where I end, I'd once written through tears on a bathroom floor. Now, I added beneath it, this is where I began.